Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're going deep into the world of ethical business.
No, this should be interesting. Always a hot topic.
It is, and we've got some great source material to work with.
Okay, lay it on me. What are we diving into?
We're looking at the ideas of Jon M. Huntsman.
Huntsman, huh? So we're talking big business, right?
Yeah, he built the Huntsman Corporation from the ground up,
Yeah.
became a multi-billionaire.
Self-made, right. I think I've heard that name before. Kind of a legend in the business world.
He is, and what's really fascinating is that he always insisted that ethical behavior wasn't just, like, a nice to have.
He saw it as more than that.
Absolutely. He believed it was the core of lasting success.
Interesting. I'm intrigued already. What sources are we using for this deep dive?
Primarily excerpts from his book, Winners Never Cheat, but we're also weaving in some commentary from Larry King and Neil Cavuto.
King and Cavuto. So we're getting a pretty well-rounded view then.
Yeah, they both knew Huntsman personally, and they come from different worlds, so their perspectives should be really insightful.
Okay, I'm ready to dive in. What's the big takeaway here?
Well, Huntsman believed that strong ethics are fundamental, not just in business.
He's talking about life in general.
Exactly. A well-lived life, period.
I like that. So where do we start? What's the foundation of his philosophy?
He calls them sandbox values. Basically, the simple things we learn as kids.
Sandbox values? Okay, like what?
Things like honesty, fairness, playing by the rules.
Yeah.
The stuff we learn on the playground.
You know, it's funny. Those can sound almost naive when you're talking about the cutthroat world of business.
Right? Like something you outgrow.
But what Huntsman is saying, I think, is that those values are actually more relevant than ever.
More important than ever. How so?
Well, think about it. What do you need to build a truly great company, a lasting legacy?
Yeah.
Trust, right? Strong relationships.
Makes sense.
And you don't get those by cutting corners or being dishonest. You build them by being a decent human being.
So it's almost like he's saying don't overcomplicate things.
Right, just go back to basics. Be a good person.
Keep it simple. I like that.
He also had this really powerful belief that every single one of us has a moral compass, kind of built in.
We instinctively know right from wrong.
Exactly. And he believed we can't really escape it, even when we try to ignore it.
Like that little voice inside is always there.
Always whispering, even when we try to rationalize things away. Is this really okay?
He even uses this great anecdote about stealing an ice cream sandwich as a kid.
To prove this point.
Yeah. He snuck one out of a store, and even before he got caught, he knew he was in the wrong. Felt terrible.
Guilt got him before the store owner did.
Exactly. And that feeling, that innate sense of right and wrong, it doesn't just go away when we become adults.
It just gets more complicated, I guess.
He even talks about a situation during his time in the Nixon White House. He was asked to do something he felt was unethical.
To discredit a political opponent?
Yep. And he flat out refused.
Knowing he could lose his job.
He put his principles above his career. So it's not enough just to know what's right. You have to have the guts to act on it, even when it's hard.
Absolutely. It's one thing to think I'd never do that, and another thing entirely when you're actually faced with that choice.
Right. Because often the pressure to compromise comes from the people around us, the culture, societal expectations.
You get swept up in it, start thinking, well, everyone else is doing it.
But Huntsman's point is that in the end, each of us is accountable for our own choices. We own them.
No excuses. No passing the buck. I like that. It takes real courage to stand up for what you believe in, especially when the stakes are high.
And one of the areas where he was really uncompromising was on playing by the rules, even when it hurt.
Sounds painful. Any examples of that?
Oh, yeah. He tells this incredible story about building a plant in Thailand.
Okay, big project, I imagine. Lots of moving parts.
Huge. And the local minister of finance wanted gifts, essentially bribes.
Cadillacs, as I recall. Not exactly subtle.
Nope. And Huntsman refused. Wouldn't do it.
So what happened? Did the deal fall through?
Eventually, he decided to sell his interest in the venture.
Walked away. Wow.
The pressure to engage in those shady practices just kept mounting.
That had to be a tough call.
It cost him millions in the short term. Millions.
But I bet it paid off in other ways.
It absolutely did.
Ah.
By refusing to compromise his integrity, Huntsman built a reputation for ethical dealing that became invaluable down the road.
So sticking to his guns actually protected him.
When the Asian economic crisis hit a few years later, a lot of companies went under.
Right. That was brutal. A lot of people lost everything.
But because Huntsman had that solid reputation, his business survived. It weathered the storm.
Wow. That's a powerful example of how doing the right thing can be the best business strategy in the long run.
He built that shield of trust, It's like what they say, a good name is more desirable than great riches.
Absolutely. In the end, your reputation is everything, and that's something money can't buy.
So we've talked about these core sandbox values and how sticking to them, even when it's tough, can actually lead to long-term success. But what about when we make mistakes? We're all human, right?
We all mess up sometimes. What does Huntsman say about that?
Well, he's very open about the fact that nobody's perfect. He even talks about his own disastrous foray into the commodities market. Lost a ton of money.
Everyone makes bad bets sometimes, even the best of us.
The important thing, he says, is to learn from those mistakes. Don't let them define you.
So it's not about never failing, it's about how you respond to those failures.
Exactly. He believed in course correction, recognizing when you've messed up and getting back on track, not dwelling on the past.
It's like that old saying, fail forward.
Exactly. And he was also really aware of the pressure cooker of success.
How success itself can tempt you to bend the rules.
He even referenced a study called The Dishonesty of Honest People.
Sounds intriguing. What did it say?
That even people with strong moral compasses can be tempted to cut corners when the stakes are really high.
The pressure builds, the potential rewards get bigger. I can see how that would happen. So what's the antidote? How do you resist that temptation?
Huntsman believed it was crucial to surround yourself with a team that shared your values.
So it's not just about hiring talented people, it's about finding people who are also good human beings.
He tells this story about an employee who left the company because his personal values clashed with the company culture. It was a wake-up call for Huntsman.
Made him realize how important that alignment was.
Because if your team is constantly wrestling with ethical dilemmas or looking for loopholes, it creates this toxic environment.
Nobody wins in that kind of situation. Trust erodes, morale plummets.
But if you can build a team where everyone's genuinely committed to doing things the right way, it's like this incredible force multiplier.
Everyone's rowing in the same direction.
And that creates a culture where people feel good about the work they're doing.
And when people feel good about their work, they're more engaged, more creative, more productive. It's a win-win.
It all comes back to those sandbox values, the foundation for everything else.
Simple, but powerful. I'm really interested to hear what King and Cavuto have to say about Huntsman, especially about how he actually lived out these principles.
Yeah, me too. Let's dive into that next. So that story about the employee leaving, that must have really shaken Huntsman, to have someone walk away because of a values clash.
It did, yeah. It made him realize how important it was to be intentional about building a company culture that reflected those core values.
Not just assuming everyone would automatically be on board.
Exactly. You can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And that means making sure everyone on the team is rowing in the same direction, ethically speaking.
It's like having a shared moral compass.
Right. Because if you have people constantly trying to cut corners or find loopholes, it creates this undercurrent of tension and distrust.
It becomes a liability, undermines the whole operation.
Ultimately, nobody wins.
And I think that's what separates Huntsman from a lot of other business leaders. He wasn't just trying to avoid unethical behavior.
He was proactively building a culture of integrity.
Where doing the right thing was the norm, not the exception.
And he took this idea even further. He often talked about running a business as if it were an extension of the family.
Okay, that's an interesting concept. What did he mean by that exactly?
Well, he saw the workplace as a place where those same sandbox values should apply. Honesty, fairness, respect.
Treat your employees like family.
It's about creating an environment where people feel valued, supported, like they can be themselves.
Where everyone has each other's backs.
Exactly. And he has this great anecdote about a plant he had in Italy where he told the employees that their families always came first.
Ahead of their jobs.
Even ahead of their jobs. He wanted them to know that he understood they had lives and responsibilities outside of work.
Wow. I don't think I've ever heard a CEO say that.
And he meant it. It wasn't just lip service. He truly believed that a company should support its employees as whole people.
Makes sense. Happy employees are productive employees.
Exactly. And this focus on family actually ties into Huntsman's views on philanthropy, which is a big part of the book.
Yeah, he was known for his generosity.
He saw giving back as an obligation, especially for those who have achieved success, a way of sharing your good fortune with others.
He and his wife, Karen, were incredibly philanthropic.
And it wasn't just about money. It was about giving your time, your energy, making a real difference in the world.
I remember reading that they even took out loans during tough economic times just so they could keep up their charitable giving.
Talk about putting your money where your mouth is. Most people would be battening down the hatches trying to ride out the storm.
But Huntsman saw it as an opportunity to double down on his commitment to helping others.
He believed that financial hardship shouldn't erase our responsibility to give back. Quite the opposite, in fact.
And it wasn't just writing checks. He was very hands-on.
Oh, yeah. Like with the Huntsman Cancer Institute.
One of the leading cancer research centers in the world.
And he didn't just sit on the board. He was actively involved, visiting patients, offering support.
That must have been so meaningful for those patients, to have someone of his stature taking a genuine interest in their well-being.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just some PR stunt. This was a cause that was deeply personal for him.
He lost both of his parents and his stepmother to cancer, and he battled the disease himself.
3 times, in fact. So he knew firsthand the devastation that cancer can cause.
And he was determined to use his resources to fight back.
And he always emphasized that philanthropy doesn't have to be this grand, sweeping gesture. It can be simple things.
Like volunteering at a local soup kitchen or mentoring a young person.
The point is to find a cause you're passionate about and contribute however you can.
He also pushed back against this idea that philanthropy is just for the wealthy.
Right. He'd always point out that studies show that lower income people often give a higher percentage of their income to charity than wealthy people do.
It's about having a generous spirit. It's not tied to your bank account.
Exactly. And Huntsman truly believed that everyone has something to offer, whether it's time, money, or simply a kind word or gesture.
So we see this recurring theme, right? Building a strong team, creating a supportive work environment, giving back to the community.
These weren't separate things for Huntsman. They were all connected.
It's like this holistic approach to business and life.
Like he was saying that these principles, integrity, generosity, compassion, they should permeate everything we do.
It's a way of being in the world.
Exactly. And it makes me even more curious to hear what Larry King and Neil Cavuto had to say about him, about how he embodied these values in his daily life.
Let's hear their perspectives next. They both knew him well, so their insights should be really valuable. Okay, so let's get into what Larry King and Neil Cavuto had to say about Jon Huntsman. It's one thing to have these beliefs about ethics, but quite another to actually live them out, especially in the high-stakes world of business.
Right. Well, Larry King, as you know, was a master interviewer, and he knew Huntsman well. He tells a story in the book that I think really gets to the heart of who Huntsman was as a person.
Oh, I'm curious. What story is that?
It's about Huntsman's response to the Armenian earthquake back in 1988. Absolutely devastating. Thousands of people were killed.
I remember that. It was horrific.
Yeah, it was a terrible tragedy. And Huntsman was so moved by the images he saw on TV, the suffering, that he just immediately pledged millions of dollars to help.
Wow, just like that.
Just like that. He didn't even have any personal connection to Armenia, no business interests there, nothing like that. He just saw a need and felt compelled to act.
That says a lot about his character.
King said that this really exemplified Huntsman's core belief, that those who have achieved success have a moral obligation to give back.
To use their resources to help others. And this wasn't just a one-time thing for Huntsman.
No, not at all. He and his wife, Karen, had this long history of philanthropy, supported all sorts of causes, from education to healthcare to poverty alleviation.
Yeah, the Huntsman Cancer Institute is a prime example.
And King also highlights Huntsman's contributions to the Wharton School of Business, his alma mater, donated a ton of money to build Huntsman Hall, this state-of-the-art facility.
So he was really investing in future generations of business leaders.
And not just with buildings. King mentions how, over the years, Huntsman awarded tons of scholarships to the children of his employees, helped them go to college.
That's pretty incredible, really putting his money where his mouth was.
Exactly. And King's ultimate takeaway was that Huntsman was a rare breed, this wildly successful businessman who never lost sight of his values.
Proving that you don't have to be ruthless to reach the top.
Right. You can be both compassionate and successful.
Okay, so we have Larry King, the king of interviewers, vouching for Huntsman's character. But what about Neil Cavuto? He's a bit more of a hard-nosed financial journalist. I'm curious to hear his perspective.
Well, Cavuto actually included Huntsman in his own book, More Than Money. It's all about people who found success beyond just, wealth. And what struck Cavuto about Huntsman was his unwavering commitment to doing the right thing, even when it was hard, even when it cost him money.
Didn't he give a specific example of that?
He did. He talks about how, during a major financial downturn, Huntsman actually took out a personal loan.
A personal loan?
Yeah.
During a recession. What for?
So he could keep his philanthropic commitments, he'd made these pledges, and he was determined to honor them, even though the economy was tanking.
Wow. Most people would be battening down the hatches in that kind of situation,
Yeah.
protecting their assets, not taking on more debt.
Exactly. And Cavuto saw this as a true testament to Huntsman's integrity, to his belief that giving back isn't optional, it's essential.
He was walking the walk, even when times were tough.
Absolutely. And of course, we can't forget about Huntsman's dedication to the fight against cancer.
Yeah, that was a huge part of his life, his legacy.
Cavuto talks about how Huntsman's own personal experience with the disease, losing both his parents to cancer, battling it himself multiple times, it really fueled his passion.
Made it a personal mission to find a cure. And he wasn't just writing checks, he was really in the trenches with the Huntsman Cancer Institute, visiting patients, advocating for more research, really putting himself out there.
And Cavuto's takeaway was that Huntsman represented this idea that true success isn't about accumulating wealth, it's about making a positive impact on the world.
Leaving a legacy that goes beyond yourself, trying to make things better for others.
Exactly. And it's amazing, right, how both King and Cavuto, coming from such different backgrounds, different perspectives, ultimately arrive at the same conclusion about Huntsman.
That he was a shining example of ethical leadership and just a good human being, someone who truly lived his values.
It's inspiring, honestly. It makes you think about your own life, your own choices. How do you want to be remembered? What kind of impact do you want to have?
Those are powerful questions, and I think that's a great place to wrap up this deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground today, but ultimately it comes down to this. We all have a choice in how we conduct ourselves, both in business and in life.
And Jon Huntsman's story is a powerful reminder that you can achieve incredible things without sacrificing your integrity. In fact, he believed that ethical behavior was actually the key to lasting success.
So as you go about your day, your week, think about the choices you're making. Are you operating from a place of integrity? Are you being kind, generous? Are you making the world a better place?
These are questions worth asking ourselves regularly. And if we can all strive to live a little bit more like Jon Huntsman, I think the world would be a much better place.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.